Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chat Up Show, the show where we catch you up with the chat up of our weekly headlines. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aloidi, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you know you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen and watch live 24/7 at www.gbkm.tv or www.gbkm.fm, where you can also catch up on any past shows you may have missed, check out our upcoming show schedule, learn a little bit more about our on-air personalities, check out our breaking news, like, share, comment, and all of that good stuff. Also, make sure to download our free app available for all iOS and Android devices. Just search GBKM, and you will be able to take us on the go with you everywhere you go. The best part about the app as well is that when we go live, you will be notified every single time, so you won't have to miss another live show again. But if you do happen to miss a live show, no worries, because it has the same features as on our web station. Past shows you can catch up on, upcoming show schedules, OAP personality reviews and comments, all of that fun stuff. So make sure you download our free app now for all iOS and Android devices. You can also continue to watch us on Facebook and YouTube live at GBKM Network, where you can also join in the conversation by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And follow us on our social media sites, Instagram and Twitter at GBKM Network for more updates on what's going on right here at GBKM. Now, it is officially Black History Month. Now, is it a little biased of me to say that it's my favorite month of the year? I don't care. I'm gonna say it. Black History Month is one of my favorite months of the year, aside from my birthday month and maybe Christmas. But it's one of my favorite times of years, and we're gonna make it extra special on the Chat Up Show. At the beginning of every episode, I'm gonna give you an interesting Black history fact that you may have not known. And if you did know it, congratulations to you historians. Well done for knowing the facts, but I will be sharing a new Black history fact at the beginning of every single episode. And so without much further ado, our first Black history fact of the month is that of Viola Davis Desmond, who was a Canadian civil rights activist and businesswoman of Black Nova Scotian descent. Now, what makes Miss Viola so impactful in our Black history is that she was kind of like our own very own Canadian Rosa Parks, because in 1946, she challenged racial segregation at a cinema in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, by refusing to leave a whites-only area of the Roseland Theatre. For this, she was convicted of a minor tax violation for the 1 cent tax difference between the seat that she had paid for and the seat that she used, which was slightly more expensive. Fortunately, in 2010, unfortunately though, that was 64 years after the incident, in 2010, the government of Nova Scotia officially apologized to her family for the incident, and in late 2018, Viola Davis Desmond became the first Canadian woman to appear alone on a Canadian banknote, the $10 bill. So if you got a $10 bill and you notice a lady on it, that might be Miss Viola Davis Desmond. So there you go. There's your first Black history fact that you may not have known, that now when we talk about Rosa Parks, we can also bring up Miss Viola Desmond's name as well. Black history for the win. Now, kind of to do with banknotes and finances, our topic for today is the importance of financial literacy in POC communities. And who better than to have financial advisor guru Harpreet Gill to join us to have this discussion, to discuss why it's important that we understand our finances, understand the resources that are available to us, especially for our immigrant communities here in Canada or even across the world as well. It's important to know what to do with your finances, what you can do, how you can set up for your future better, and that it's not too early to start thinking about the steps to take to set yourself up for retirement. So please help me and join me in welcoming our special guest for today, Ms. Harpreet Gill. Welcome to the Chat Up Show, Harpreet.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that amazing, warm introduction. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Me too. Now, I kind of want to start off, just jump right into it and start off with your story as to how you yourself got yourself up by your bootstraps and decided to become more financially literate. It essentially started with a disappointing bank visit with your financial advisor. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Like so many people in BIPOC communities, I don't think we see much representation in the financial services industry, and we don't even think about being financial advisors or anything of that sort. But my journey really started with that disappointment that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I really was interested in learning more about mortgages, and I thought, okay, you know what? I really don't know too many people around me who I can ask these questions, so I'll make an appointment with an advisor at the bank that I've been banking with for so long, and just go ask a few questions so I can at least make sure as I'm planning for these goals, I'm taking the right steps, because I'm like that. I like to know what things I need to prepare for, what challenges there might be, because it's money. I'm not that much of a risky person when it comes to money. I like to dot my I's and cross my T's as much as I can before I take that risk. And that appointment turned into like a 2-minute meeting, if that 2-minute interaction is what I should say. The lady had me put my card into the machine, and she was like, "Oh, okay, so you know what? You should come back when you have about $60,000, and we'll talk to you then." And I was like, "Excuse me, what do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, come back when you have about $60,000. Mind you, I just had graduated, no sort of savings at all. $32,000 of student loan debt. And I just felt so defeated, because I was just like, can I just ask two questions? Just two questions, and that's it. I'll get out of your face after that." And she was just like, no, just come back. And that was my first interaction with an advisor. I'm not saying that all advisors are like that, but that was my introduction. And it just left a really terrible taste in my mouth. And you know what? It was a blessing in disguise, looking back, hindsight, because if I had gotten the answers that maybe she had answered my questions to, I don't know if I would have gone this route to exploring more about financial literacy and learning more than just what I wanted to learn about mortgages at the time. And that's how the journey started. I started to become so infatuated with my own teachings and things that I was learning. And I come from the social work industry, and so a lot of the stuff that I was learning, I was then teaching back to the youth in the Jane and Finch and Rexdale communities about saving, budgeting, credit, just having a healthy money mindset. And then I came across another advisor, and she just literally changed my world, opened up a whole new world of rules of money. And that's one thing I want to focus on, because I was terrible in math when I was in high
Me
school,
too.
and that kind of intimidated me. And one thing that I learned is that financial literacy is very little about money, the actual numbers, and it's more about the rules of money. And once you understand the rules of money, you can understand how to navigate the world, because people who are wealthy and people who are, let's say, not so wealthy, we live in the same society. It's just that those people understand the rules and they have the information to benefit them in a way that we don't necessarily have access to. And the more I learned, I was like, okay, you know what? This is what I want to get into. Because I went into social work thinking I can fight the power and change the systems and all kinds of things that we go in with our naive mindsets. And you realize that really, really quickly, you can't do that in a system where, if people are dependent on the government, there's absolutely no way the government wants us to make changes, because they have us exactly where they want us. Whereas at the bottom, working class, work till we die, struggle, pay our bills, and be content with that. And so I figured, you know what? Since my passion is community, I can never get out of that mind state of like giving back to the community. I figured, why not go get this license and the education that I need so I can bring it back to the community and make a real impact? Because when people have control of their money, then they have buying power. And when we have buying power, we have access to ownership. And the only way to make some real change is when we have ownership, because then we can say, you know what, we don't need a seat at your table. We have our own table here. We'll run our things our kind of way, and kind of run things that way. And that's kind of what started my journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, just you kind of mentioned that you initially just wanted to learn a little bit more about mortgages. And, now we're thinking about home ownership. A lot of us are at that time, we're thinking, okay, we want to settle down, buy our first home. But we're
Yes.
looking at the Toronto real estate market like, bruh, I don't know how realistic that's going to be in the next few years because no, I don't have $1 million to fork over for a house.
Right. Right.
So, like, what are some of these rules, like, about money that, isn't so readily available to the masses, essentially? What are some of the things you've learned in terms of money rules?
Let me just start with even just the basic day-to-day stuff, our banking systems. When I sit down with clients and including myself before I became financially literate, I never really thought about, oh, I'm putting money into the bank account. How come I'm not earning any interest on this? No, it never didn't even occur to me because in my mind, this is just what we're supposed to do. We're just supposed to have bank accounts and they charge us on a monthly basis to have these accounts. It didn't occur to me like, okay, you know what? They're taking our money and then they're actually giving it out to other people at higher interest rates. So I'm getting nothing for it. You and I are getting nothing for it. But then the people who are borrowing the money are getting essentially our money because what's in our bank account is just digital money. We don't really have that physical money in there. If you have $100,000 in your bank account and you actually want to withdraw that money, you actually have to call the bank a few days ahead of time to let them know, hey, you know what? I'm coming by this day, such and such. I need $20,000. Because if you go over there and ask them for $20,000,
They won't
they
have it.
probably won't have it to give to you because the money has been gone. It's been lent out already. So a very basic rule, for example, the rule of 72, I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but it's a really, really simple formula. And I really try to understand why they didn't teach us this when we were even in middle school because it's so simple.
Yeah.
And the rule of 72 helps us to determine how quickly our money is going to double up, whether it's in our savings or whether it's in our, debt. So for example, the average interest rate that a person would get on a savings account is about 0.01, if that much. So
That's
pretty much
nothing.
nothing.
What's the point?
What's the point? Might as well just keep it, right?
Yeah.
But let's just say, just to keep the numbers easy and basic, let's say if your bank was giving you 1% return on your money. And let's just say if you were 29 years old and you had $10,000 in there and you want to figure out how quickly that money is going to double up, how that would work is you take the number 72 in every case when you're figuring this formula out, you always take the number 72 and you divide it by the interest that you're either gaining or paying. So in this case, we're going to do 72 divided by 1, which is the amount that we're saying that the bank is going to give us. 72 divided by 1 equals 72. That's telling us it's going to take us 72 years for our $10,000 to double up to $20,000. So if you're 29, you'd have to hit about 101 years old for you to see a return on your money. And we all know that in 72 years, $20,000 is going to be worth peanuts.
Nothing.
And on top of that, we're paying banking fees every month, overdraft protection, NFS charges. If you need a check, you have to pay for that. Like we have to pay for everything. So we're actually going into a deficit every single month. So our dollar value is depleting. But if you took that same rule of 72 and then you flipped it over to, let's say, your credit card debt, the average credit card debt is about 20%. So if you were, let's say, 29 and had $10,000 of debt and you wanted to figure out how quickly that's going to double up, you take the number 72 and you divide it by 20%. And I'm not a math whiz or anything, but I've done the number so many times, so I know that the answer is actually 3.6, meaning that your debt will double up every 3.6 years if you just leave it untouched or even pay the minimum payments.
What? So it takes about 72 years to double the money that you have, but your debt will take like maybe 3.5 years.
Yeah, actually, you know what? One thing I just want to mention is we said 1%. The average is 0.01. So if you
0.01.
actually
That's
took
even less.
72 divided by 0.01, it's actually 7,200 years that our money will take to double up.
So then how can people like start doubling up their money? Like how do you start that journey of trying to somewhat?
That's an excellent question, Elizabeth. That's why you need to become financially literate because we need to invest our money and speak to professionals like myself who know what they're doing. Because there's a lot of people out here that are getting investment advice from people who don't know how to invest, who don't know how, we're getting our local cryptocurrency investors
Or
and our
rappers.
forex trade investors, and I've had those people as clients, and I'm looking at their finances and I'm like, you have no business buying forex when you have x amount of dollars of debt, or you have no savings, you have no emergency fund, you have no life insurance. There's a formula of how we build wealth. So it's every investment comes with a risk. That's just a given. But the type of risk is determined on a spectrum. So let's just say on one spectrum is on the low end, on the other spectrum, it's on the high end, and everything in between. But we have to at least on this, let's say on the low end, you're getting 4 or 5% return on your investment, which to me is a like a low risk investment. We at least need to get to that because inflation, are the average used to be 2%. Last year, it went up to as high as 5%. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up to about 6% this year, or if not higher. So if cost of living is going up 5% every single year, but you're not gaining any sort of money on your savings or anything like that, then we're depleting our money. So it's important to really speak to a professional, especially if you don't know what you're doing, because my job is really to get to know my client better. I go through a risk tolerance questionnaire. I educate people. I provide free financial literacy sessions on an ongoing basis. The information is there, but I think the fear kind of holds us back, because when you don't know what you're doing. And like I mentioned, when I first went to the bank, I was a low risk investor. Now that I'm financially savvy, my risk tolerance has changed, and you can have different investments with different objectives. So for example, you might say, you know what, this money here is retirement money. I'm only in my 30s. That means I have 30 years to let that sit and grow. I can be a little more aggressive with it, because if the market crashes in the next 3 years, there's enough time for it to go back up and for me to recoup my money and gain back more. But this investment right here, you know what, I'm saving for a down payment, which I'm trying to pull out in the next 4 years. I don't want to take too much risk with that, because this is what I'm saving for my down payment in the short term. So you might want to put that into a low risk investment. So there's different objectives, and the education behind everything will help you become more confident in your ability to invest. Because if we don't invest, it's going to be a really tough journey. And especially coming from BIPOC communities and families of immigrants, our parents did the amazing job coming to this country, because I couldn't imagine leaving my home country to go to a country where I don't have any money, there's no real promises. And they came here and they did an amazing job at surviving and working really hard. But just like how we don't have the education, they didn't have the education to pass those knowledges on to us as well. Yeah. So we really got to start shifting the way we do things and putting ourselves in spaces where, one, you can learn from people who know more than you, because I always say, if we're the smartest person in the class, we're in the wrong class. That means there's no room for any more growth, because if everybody is, not to say lower than you in a negative way, but maybe they're not at the same level of life as you, it's going to be really hard to learn to elevate yourself to the next level.
Yeah, and that's why we have you to help us get there. And it's also, just speaking of representation as well, you mentioned that there aren't a lot of BIPOC financial advisors who get that. Granted, not everybody's coming from generational wealth, but there are others within certain communities that have a little bit more of a leg to stand on than a lot of us in the BIPOC community. So having representation like you who gets it, and it's like, trust me, I understand that we all want to have a seat at the table, but maybe it's time we build our own tables instead of trying to get a foot into a place that's trying to keep us out for so long. I mean, you got turned away so quickly. Like, nobody even gave you like a second or a chance to even explain why you wanted to find out the information that you wanted. And that's kind of disheartening. But to have financial advisors like you who aren't ready to just shut the door in your face and are ready to like work with you and find a strategy that works best for you as well.
Right.
So in your experience, like, what is the best advice you could give someone, say, who's just graduated, has, as you've actually mentioned, like one of the statistics on your website, if you're looking for that, that's harpreetgill.com. One of the statistics is that the average Canadian university graduate finishes school with more than $26,000 in debt.
Right. So you know what? There's so many different avenues of how you can go about, tackling your debt situation. And I'll give you an example of mine. Um, for one, we have to be mindful of cash flow because if we're graduating with $26,000 average, and some people are graduating with higher amounts of debt, of course, there's some people who are graduating with lower amounts of debt. But if average is 26,000, but the average graduate is coming out of school earning about 45,000, that it's going to be really tough to get out of debt because obviously that's you're almost just making a little over double of what your debt amount is, right? And it's going to take a long time because it's not just our debt that we have to take care of. We might have children, we might have to take care of our bills, our rents, everything else in between. So we got to be really mindful of our cash flow. Having multiple streams of income is so vital in this day and age. I know that back in the days, it used to be kind of like a luxury talk, having multiple streams of income. But now, 2022, it is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity for us to have multiple streams of income because you then can be able to tackle more of your, financial goals. And so, like for myself, when I first graduated from school, I landed my first job that was, I was earning $50,000 annually. And I was so excited because I've never had a salary job before. I never earned $50,000 before. And I thought was, wow, oh my goodness, I'm going to be living a great life now because $50,000. And you learn really quickly after all the taxes, deductions, and everything else, there's really not a whole lot of money to play around with. And for me, my two goals were to get my down payment and to pay off my student loan debt. And I was able to do that in a span of a 3.5, 4 years. I put $93,000 on my first property and I paid off $32,000 of my student loan debt. But I hustled and bustled and I worked. And I'm not saying for everyone to do exactly what I did, but there is a level of sacrifice and there's a level of focus and there's a level of determination that requires us to get to these places. So one thing I knew was, okay, I want to work extra jobs because at least all the extra jobs will help me pay off my debt and also help me build up my down payment. But I also knew that it wouldn't make sense to work extra jobs because in this country, the more you earn, the more taxes you have to pay. So I worked my full-time day job as an employment counselor, and then I worked 4 part-time cash jobs. Almost any cash job I can try to get my hand onto, I was literally doing it. Yes, I was a little sleep deprived, but I was also okay with that at that moment because, in my mind, I'm like, if I can accomplish this goal in the next 4 years, then I don't have to worry for the rest of my life about certain things, right? Because I've seen people in student loan debts for like 10, 15 plus years, and that's a huge burden for a lot of people, right? And so the cash flow and then like the sacrifices, I cut off so many things. I even wrote a letter to to a bunch of my friends one year. I said, you know what? I am so focused on getting to my financial goals. I'm going to be very clear that over the next 12 to 18 months, please don't invite me to any birthdays, baby showers, nothing. Do not invite me because one of the things that I'm good at saving, but I'm a giver. I give. And so that's one of my downfalls. And especially as you get older, there's a birthday party every other week. There's a wedding, there's this, there's that. Of course, I wouldn't miss a wedding or something big that's happening in someone's life. But that even came with me being like, okay, you know what? If I'm going into the store with a budget, I have to stick to that budget. But I cut out takeout food. I just went from, maybe if I was doing a takeout a couple of times a week, I cut it down to one time a week. And it wasn't like big restaurant foods. It would be maybe like a drive-through type of a food or something. I didn't buy clothes for those years. I didn't really indulge in any sort of extra things. I cut my, gym when Planet Fitness was put at Jane and Finch at Yorgate Mall. I was so happy because I was like, I no longer have to go to like a Good Life where I have to pay $40, $50 a month for a gym membership. I can cut that down to $10. I cut down my costs as much as possible, even down to my phone plan, everything. And that was what helped me to really accelerate a lot of my goals is that the hustle, because many of us are not coming from wealth. Many of us are not going to inherit our hundreds of thousands of dollars from our family, or even thousands of dollars, much less. No one's going to say to us, here you go, here's $50,000. You don't have to give this back to me. It's not a loan, but this is just for you to have startup money. Go get yourself a house or go start a business or whatever the case is. So that means that we got to put that work in. We got to sacrifice, because if we don't sacrifice, then how we're living today is going to be how we're living in the future, because our future is dictated by the decisions that we make today. If I had a client last summer, and it was heartbreaking, honestly. She was 64 years old. Her goal was to retire by 65, so it would have been this year. And she started getting her CPP and old age security letters, and she wanted me to help her understand what it meant. So I gave her a breakdown. The maximum that someone can get for CPP is about just a little over $1,200. And the maximum you can get for old age security is just a little over $600. Now, the average person, even though 1,200 is the maximum for CPP, the average person only gets about seven something. So most people are probably living on government funds for about $1,200 a month, which is obviously nothing close to what we need. And so this individual, she wasn't eligible for the entire amounts. And I said to her, you know what, this is what you need on a monthly basis. This is what you're going to get from the government. And the other additional funds, you're going to have to figure out how to get those. And I had to ask her, do you have any retirement savings? And she told me she had $30,000 saved, and she was 64 years old. And for me, someone who's much younger, it felt like I was speaking to my mom, because, I had to tread water so lightly, because I'm just like, I would feel super depressed if someone's telling me that the likelihood of you retiring is 0 to none. And in fact, you're going to have to probably work way longer than you would like to, or possibly have to work till the rest of your life. That is hard. That is so hard to tell someone at 64 years old.
I can't even imagine. I mean, a lot of us don't think about that. We're thinking, oh, we're young, retirement's like way, way away.
Yes.
But you're still having to plan for your future, because that time's going to come, and it's going to come quick. Before you realize it, you might be 64 thinking, I'm going to retire next year, but you don't have enough to survive, essentially.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
And the pot is going to get smaller. For one, right now 65 is the retirement age, but they're going to push it to 67. And I wouldn't be surprised when our generation retires, if it's well into the 70s. And if first of all, baby boomers is one of the largest populations in Canada. So that means there's not enough young people contributing back to that CPP pot or the old age security pot. And there's a lot more people who are becoming entrepreneurs. And this is one thing I really want to emphasize, because as entrepreneurs, there is no CPP. You don't have that luxury of getting that money, because that's something that we have to contribute with our employment income and all that kind of stuff. So as entrepreneurs, as business owners, that is, I know, because we get so caught up in the hustle and growing our businesses and things like that, that we forget sometimes our finances. But it is so vital for us to plan for ourselves financially and retirement, because the government definitely is not going to take care of us.
That's like a hard pill to swallow, honestly, but it's a truth pill, that
Right.
a lot of us need to hear. And we actually do have to go on a quick break, but when we're back, I want to kind of dive into how, because I know you have a formula as to how to essentially come up with a sum and how much you need to start saving every year until retirement. So I want to discuss that when we're back. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
The bad news is that everyone is a potential victim. But the good news is that everyone is a potential solution. Sensitize the masses to sanitize. Keep a social distance and quarantine. Stop!
The coronavirus is sweeping over mankind.
Everybody must be alert. It's a global pandemic we can never take for granted.
Omulwadde wa corona temubuzanyisa bange.
Kila mtu must be alert. It's a matter of life we can never take for.
Hello and welcome back to the Chat Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aloidi, and we're joined today by financial advisor Harpreet Gill. Now, before we went on the break, we were talking about retirement, and there's a statistic that kind of scared me a little bit. that 74% of Canadians are not ready for retirement and that 40% of Canadians will retire broke.
Yes.
That's a little scary.
Yeah. It's definitely scary. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of us are not thinking about these things because we think we have a lot of time. Um, but if the average person is making about $3,000 a month, that means we don't have a whole lot of money to left over to save.
Yeah.
And so if you're even putting $500 a month away, it's still, if you're starting in your 30s or in your 40s, that's still not enough for us to save up the amount that we need when we retire. And so it is a very, very scary fact. But I think that also, I don't want people to feel hopeless because you can get to that point because when you're thinking about all these things, you're thinking, oh my God, there's no way. I promise you, I promise you, I promise you, as long as you sit down with somebody, contact me. I offer so many resources. Sit down with a professional and really get yourself to a place where you can, because one of my clients, for example, who is now a teammate of mine. Anybody who's looking for an opportunity in the financial services industry, I'm building up a team of agents and I provide the mentorship. So if anybody's looking for that, you guys can contact me for that as well. But one of my clients, I met her at the beginning of 2020. So just before the pandemic, she had $200 in her name. That's all she had for savings. She went from $200. Her goal was to save by $10,000 by the end of 2020. She actually ended up saving $25,000 by the end of the year because everything I told her, she followed it to the T. And sometimes I like to be a little bit more on the soft side because if you give people too many aggressive goals, it can also overwhelm them and then they don't end up doing anything. But I started her off small. By June, she had that 10,000 saved. And by the end of the year, she had $25,000 saved. And so if you put your mind to it and you really work and you sacrifice, I promise you, there's absolutely no way that you won't be able to get to a comfortable space financially. But you have to take action because knowledge, you can sit there and get all the knowledge in the world. We see this with, university students all the time. They're smart as all can be. Throw them into the real world and it's like their intelligence just disappears. And that's the same thing that I tell people when it comes to financial literacy. It's great to have the literacy, but sometimes the literacy just isn't enough. You need a professional to help you implement that literacy because when you get the literacy, it's a very general way of putting things, but how you apply it to each person is going to be different. So for example, an RSP. Some people have negative views about RSPs. Some people have positive reviews of RSPs. But to me, it's not negative or positive. It is circumstantial to whom it makes sense to. If you're making less than $50,000 a year, I would never recommend an RSP, to be honest. But if you're making more than $50,000 a year, there's purposes that as to why you might want to utilize that, right? So you might see on a paper it says RSP, you can contribute 18,000, you get a tax deduction, you get this. You're getting the rules, but the application of that knowledge is going to look different for each person. So make sure you sit down with a professional because just like anything in life, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to, win a marathon or you're trying to start a business and you've never started one, mentorship and coaching is so important because the coach is going to help you figure out a plan that makes sense to you. And I think one of the problems in the financial services industry is that there's so many advisors that don't do that. They're just telling you, come here, give me your money, we'll put it here, we'll do it there. And then I sit down with clients who have had advisors in the past and I'm like, do you know why you have this? Do you know why you have this life insurance? Do you know why you're putting this over here? And they have absolutely no clue. And that's because the advisor hasn't educated them. They haven't taken the time to actually inform them of what they're doing. Whereas when I sit down with my client, yes, it takes a little bit more time, but for me, I feel more comfortable knowing that my client knows why I'm doing what I'm doing for them, not just because I'm saying, okay, I'm the expert and I'm going to do, you just listen to me blindly and trust me. No, let's talk about this. Let's have the conversations. I offer free webinars on a monthly basis. I actually have one tomorrow that's coming up at 6 p.m. If you want to tap into that, it's over Zoom. You can check out my website, and under the events tab, you can register. But I'll also be having another one on the 12th of this month as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn, but then make sure you don't just sit there and ponder with the information. You book an appointment so we can figure out how to create the solutions. And no matter how bad you think your situation is, there's going to be some sort of wisdom I can give you that's going to help you go back and do the homework. So that way, okay, you know what? You might not be ready to invest. You might not be ready to do certain things, but there's other pieces of the information that you can get beforehand that will help you get to the space where you're now ready to invest and do everything else.
Now, I wanna talk about life insurance. You kind of brought it up, but especially now during the pandemic, there were so many deaths that were unexpected and that kind of rocked a lot of families where it was maybe the source of income in the family who passed away. So they don't have any money to pay rent or even cover funeral costs. And on
Right.
top of that, there's no life insurance policy or life insurance in general as well. But you preach the importance of having life insurance, and why can you just explain to us why it's important to have that? Because I think a lot of people hear about it, but I don't think life insurance is as marketed to us as car insurance or even home insurance. Like if you go on, there's a bank. I'm not gonna name drop them because I don't want them to come for me. But like you only see like auto and home insurance, but then there's no like life insurance section. Like why isn't that?
It's so funny that you say that. I actually posted a reel on my Instagram yesterday and saying, don't you find it suspicious that car insurance and home insurance is mandatory, but life insurance is not? And there's a reason for that. We talked about systems and the power that be, how they've designed society to keep us low, because life insurance is one of the most liberating financial tools that you can find, one of the easiest and most cheapest ways to build generational wealth. And there's so many reasons as to why life insurance is important. So for one, there's a pyramid that I use. Just think of like literally a pyramid, and think of like a needs, priority needs thing. So at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the foundation, which is the most important part, is insurance. Then taking care of our debt, then building up our emergency fund, and then building our investments. Because you can invest all you want, but if, hey, you get sick, you get cancer, you get a heart attack, if your income stops, you won't be able to sustain those investments anyways. If you have a house, you won't be able to maintain your mortgage. So we think a lot of times our investments are our greatest asset, but our greatest asset is our ability to actually earn income. If we can't earn income, then everything else stops. And a lot of times I come across clients, for example, they'll say, oh, I'm ready to buy that $1 million house. And I'm like, you're not even in the position to buy that $1 million house, but they're determined to get that $1 million house. But then I say, hey, you know what? If you're getting $1 million house, you're going to need about a $2 million life insurance policy. And then it's like, oh, no. $80 a month for insurance is too much, but you're willing to risk it all to get $1 million house, which is actually a liability. It's not an asset. It is actually a liability. How? It just doesn't make sense. So you want to protect yourself first, because if you get sick and your income stops, everything is going to come crumbling down. And we see how hard it is to build wealth, but all it takes is one situation for things to go completely left and we can lose everything. I actually have a teammate of mine. She's getting into her 50s now, just about getting to her 50s. But when she was younger, she bought her first house with her student loan money. She had a nice stock portfolio and all that kind of stuff. And her son got into a really bad car accident 10 years ago, ended up in a coma with brain injuries, and all of her investments got depleted because we think, oh, we live in Canada, the healthcare system is going to take care of us. There's only so much the healthcare system will do. Everything else is after that on you. So that's number one, life insurance. And then the debt management, because most of our debt, like we talked about, is growing a lot faster than our savings are. Then building up the emergency fund, because emergencies happen, doesn't matter what race we are, gender, religion, emergencies happen to all of us. We need to have that so we don't end up putting ourselves back into debt. And then we build up the investments. Once you have this entire pyramid ready, that's when you know you've built a solid foundation. And from there, it just continues to multiply. Now, couple reasons why life insurance is important outside of the fact that, of course, we can get sick or there could be a death in the family that's going to make an impact. Now, when we die, I always say that the unfortunate reality is each and every single one of us are worth more dead than we are alive. When we die, we're either going to transfer our debt to our family because debt just doesn't vanish into thin air, it gets transferred. And or our wealth gets transferred to our family. Now, when it comes to debt, easy, gets passed on, no problem.
No
If you
taxes on
have
that.
no taxes on the debt. But if you have wealth, let's just say if somebody passed away December 2021, they had a few properties, they had their TFSAs, all that kind of stuff. The government says, no, we're about to freeze everything that this deceased person owned. So in order for the family to inherit this wealth now, you got to pay up capital gains taxes, which is taxes on all the profits of all the investments. Then you have to pay probate tax, and probate tax is an administrative tax. Then there's final taxes. So you know how we are supposed to, it's tax season now, and we file our taxes for a previous year. Even though this person died last year, their family is responsible for filing their taxes for the last year that they were alive. Because if you ever take a look at a tax form, the first page is the information sheet, and you'll see two boxes, alive or deceased. When you click off the deceased, these are the final taxes. Now, some people might say, you know what? Well, I don't have any debt and I don't have any assets, so I don't need life insurance. One thing that's guaranteed is that we're all going to die, and our funerals are expensive. From the coffins to the gravestones to the digging the hole to renting space to keep your body to transporting your body, and then if we have cultural practices that we do, all of those things cost a lot of money. So at least you need to have, even if you don't have debt or you don't have assets, you need to have some, so that way your family doesn't have to struggle with the funeral kit cost, because the average person doesn't have 25,000, because 20,000 is average on a cheap end for a funeral, and the average person doesn't have $20,000 saved up for a funeral, right? And death is unexpected. We don't expect death in most cases, so it happens unexpectedly. Like, take a look what's happened over the last 2 years. So many unexpected deaths, and I've come across so many different clients who have expressed how much of a struggle it is to plan for a funeral when you're not financially there, and there's just so many moving pieces that you have to take into consideration. And these are things that we have to think about when we're alive. And I know that there's so much taboo in our communities, because it's like, well, if you talk about death or if you talk about life insurance, that means that, by tomorrow we'll probably be dead.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Or
we
like
gotta
you want them dead if you're trying to educate them.
Exactly. And that's something that we really got to dismantle in our communities, because there's a reason why they don't want us to have life insurance, because life insurance, like I said, is the cheapest way to build up generational wealth, and things are not getting easier. If you, as a parent or whatever the case may be, maybe you couldn't afford a house in this lifetime, but you can afford a life insurance policy, and that life insurance policy is probably going to pay you more at a cheaper rate than what you bought the house for, and we're going to transfer that to. So there's other ways to build up generational wealth, because generational wealth can only happen when there's a transfer of wealth. Money goes from one generation to another. And if we don't have insurance, it's going to be really difficult, because even in the case where if you have assets, what's going to happen is, if the person doesn't have life insurance, the family's going to now have to sell the assets off to be able to afford all those taxes and fees and lawyer costs and everything else in between. And then whatever little bits and pieces are left for you to keep, that's yours to keep after the government collects what's theirs. And my dad, he's a smart man when it comes to real estate investing. And when I got into this industry, me and him were never really that close growing up, but I had to ask him. I said, do you have life insurance? And the first thing he said to me, oh, that's bullshit. I don't do life insurance. And I'm like, so then what are you buying all these investments for? Because you might as well just give them to the government now. Like, it really doesn't make sense. Yeah. And so, of course, he's in his 60s and he's stubborn and stuck in his old ways. And it took a lot of arguing, and it took a lot of, one time I called him when I was at work, and I was like, how much do you have in mortgages and with all your, and he's like, why are you asking me this question? I'm like, because I'll get the life insurance on you and I'll pay it. And he's like, you're not getting nothing on me. And I'm just like, I don't want to have to deal with all the headaches after the fact. If I could just, deal with it now. And he was so against it, but eventually he finally came through, after enough talking and getting my mentor involved, who, was also an older gentleman. So maybe he respected his opinion more than he respected mine at the time. But it's so important. It's so important for us to really get our mindset right, because that's why I say it's about the rules, because there's so many, I see so many African Canadians who are doing amazing things in this country when it comes to entrepreneurship and building up, investments and stuff like that. But then the other part that most of us are neglecting is the insurance part. And that is, like I said, so crucial to our wealth building journey.
Yeah. Wow. And before we let you go, I thank you for coming on the show, but how can we, how can folks reach out to you and keep up with you and to find out more of the services that you offer as well?
Yes, absolutely. So, you guys can contact me, whether it's phone or email. My phone number is 437-229-5149. My email address is contact@harpreetgill.com, and Harpreet is spelled HARPRITGILL.com. You can also follow me on Instagram, which is harpreetgill_. My Instagram has been restricted actually as of December. They told me for 90 days, which would mean up until maybe March or so. And this is just goes to show us, like, I don't have a huge following. I have a reasonable following, but I think it's the information that I put out there that they don't want us to know. So that just goes to show that the information that I'm spreading and sharing is super powerful. So if you can't find me on Instagram, it's probably because they've restricted my account for the 90-day period. But yes, at least you can contact me. You can check out my website, which is harpreetgill.com. So it's my name all across the board. And yeah.
Just Google her. You'll find her. Trust me. You're like one of the first hits that come up, which is amazing, because the information that you're offering is so important to a lot of people. So thank you so much, Harpreet, for joining us on the Chat Up Show and giving us a little bit of these tidbits of information that we will need to build our own generational wealth, or just build some sort of a foundation to feel like we can stand on our own 2 feet, all the way through to retirement. And thank you again. We're going to let you go.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed having this conversation with you.
We will definitely have you back for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you have an amazing day. And for all the listeners and watchers out there, I hope you guys all have an amazing day as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harpreet.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And that officially concludes the Chat Up Show. As always, you can keep up with us on the GBKM network by listening and watching live 24/7 at www.gbkm.tv or www.gbkm.fm. Make sure you continue to keep up with us all through Black History Month, because we've got so much more coming to you. Also, make sure to download our free app available for all iOS and Android devices. Just search GBKM. You'll be able to listen and watch live, take us on the go 24/7, and you'll be notified every time we go live, so you won't miss another live show. You can also continue to follow us on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM Network, or on Instagram and Twitter at GBKM Network for more updates on what's going on right here at GBKM. And you can also follow me, your host, Elizabeth Aloidi, on Instagram and Twitter at TIS_Liz_O. And with that, I will let you guys go. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Black History Month, and I will see you the same time, same place next week. Take care.
The bad news is that everyone is a potential victim, but the good news is that everyone is a potential solution. Sensitize the masses to sanitize, keep a social distance and quarantine.
Coronavirus is sweeping over mankind.
Everybody must be alert. It's a global pandemic we can never take for granted.
Omulwadde wa corona temubuzanyisa bange.
Kila mtu must be alert. It's a matter of life we can never take for granted. Discipline and personal hygiene, and make sure you regularly wash your hands. Keep a distance from everyone. Report anything like a symptom. Serious fever is a symptom. Dry cough is a symptom. Walkway tamula is a symptom. Itchy eyes and flu is a symptom.
Kumo butabusiga Rejemu batanalwala Ulago moyo gwe gwanga Mulabira kuyitale Abasinga bafude Okuwewala Kisingako bujajaba The coronavirus is sweeping over mankind.
Everybody must be alert. It's a global pandemic we can never take for granted. Kila mtu must be alert. It's a matter of life we can never take for granted.
The coronavirus is sweeping over mankind.
Everybody must be alert. The bad news is that everyone is a potential victim. But the good news is that everyone is a potential solution.